Hello, and welcome to the series, Come Follow Me, a series in which I'm going to attempt to show you how 6 different people responded to the invitation of Jesus to follow in his footsteps. Hopefully, at the end of this series, you'll come to see how each one of these traditions has its own unique characteristics and its own unique way of following Christ.
It's a way of life that is radical, is total, but in such a way that it's reachable. It's not something you have to have a special training for, that you have to go to another country to be able to do, or serve in a certain kind of way, but it just permeates all of your life, every element. So that I think that is the beauty and richness of the Rule of Benedict, because it's just it isn't just simple, but it's deep, so deep. One of the things that he says is that all the tools of the monastery should be treated like the vessels of the altar. And if you take that all the tools, all the things we use in the monastery, then it means that the floor of the monastery is the altars, the top of the altar surface. Everything we do is given in that way to the Lord. And it's for Him and with Him. And it's a prayer in itself. So it's just this time when we're sometimes very specifically praying that we can recognize ourselves, the divine office or a quiet prayer. And then the rest, when we're just doing all the things everybody else does, sweeping, cleaning, writing letters, mowing the lawn.
5 times in the Gospels, Jesus says, "Come, follow me." After his death and resurrection, the early Christians just thought that they weren't going to be around much longer, that Christ would come back for them. So they looked at themselves as aliens, as pilgrims. We know that Christians were persecuted, but in point of fact, Christian persecution was more sporadic than it was systematic. Only about 1,000 martyrs actually died, and the majority of them were bishops and prominent Christians. They were not your average run-of-the-mill Christian. Early Christianity had a 40% growth rate a year, and women who were the most prominent, especially in the upper levels of society, were often able to convince their husbands to protect the church. In 313, the Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Toleration, which simply continued the state practice of the Emperor Galerius in 311, which exempted Christians from praying to Roman gods. Early on, solitaries begin to emerge. They were called the devout, and they oftentimes lived on the outskirts of a city, and they spent time prayer and fasting, penitential practices, and living a life of virtue. People oftentimes learned spiritual practices from these people known as the devout. But it's in the 300s that a whole new way of following Christ and answering the call to imitate and follow in his footsteps emerges.